today's Pulse digital marketing track, like Beth said, is the first time we're doing this track, and I'm so excited. Digital marketing is my passion, and I love to talk about it, so I hope we can all get something out of it. And the theme of Pulse this time is Mad Dash to 2022. So the idea is to give you guys tactics that can help you build your digital marketing program in the long term, as well as things that you can do to get ready for 2022 with it. As you guys know, it goes by really quickly. So the holidays are going to be here before you know it. There we go. So who am I? So I've met some of you guys in person, and the rest of you, I'm so excited to get to know you. I'm Jenn Barber. As Beth said, I'm based in San Diego. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing for Next Year Solutions. I lead our team in creating campaigns and events, sales support, all the things that you see out and about for the Next Year brand. I've been working with Next Year Solutions since November 2018, but joined with this leadership role just this summer. I'm originally from Flint, Michigan. Very proud to be from Flint. So you might hear there's, even throughout this presentation, there's mentions of Flint and Michigan. Went to MSU. And I love to play pickleball and just work out and run. And I'm married with 2 kids, and I have 2 cats and a dog. So luckily, I think we're safe to not have any cats or dogs running in the room at any given time. But Beth could tell you that that happens from time to time when you're on a call with me. So what are we going to talk about today? So one, just get a sense of how you run your marketing. There's lots of different ways, and none are wrong. We just kind of take a pulse on what you guys are up to right now. Reinforce why you need a marketing strategy for 2022. We're going to go through something called RACE, R-A-C-E framework to help put your plan together. And then we'll leave time, as Beth said, for Q&A, which will facilitate through the chat. And throughout this whole presentation, there's going to be polls and quizzes. So if you just have your phone ready, there's going to be some, and you'll see it in a second, but just like when you go out to restaurants now and you scan a code to get access to a web page to interact, we're going to have that throughout this presentation, so get ready for that. So we're going to start with, how do you run your marketing? So first up is one of those polls that I mentioned. So if you have your phone and you scan this QR code and answer this question, then we're going to see in real time what your answers are. So I'll just leave it up for a little bit to get those answers rolling in. Like right now, 100%, yes, everybody's using it. That's great. There's a no. All right, so it seems like the majority, so everybody on this call anyways, is using digital marketing now. Great. So there's a couple of different ways to run your marketing, and there's probably a million different ways, but for the sake of this presentation, and just going back to that whole mad dash. So when you think about whether you're running a marathon or any kind of race, you can sprint or you can marathon. So in the context of marketing, so if you're a sprinter, then your mentality is probably the faster you go, the sooner you'll get there. Getting marketing out quickly over a short amount of time sometimes just feels good. I know that's true. Like if you can just have some quick wins, it feels like you're making progress. And with digital marketing especially, the great thing about it is you can do things quickly and get it out to the masses. So what are the pros of that approach? So gaining momentum with quick wins. You can check one goal off your list at a time to make long-term goals feel less daunting. Cons. So you may not see the entire picture because your focus is narrow. So if you're always like squirrel, 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 chasing the next campaign, then it's hard to kind of see the forest through the trees and then your long-term goals. It can create reactive behavior when it comes to customers. Say one customer wants one thing, another one wants another thing, and then you're just kind of chasing that without learning how it supports your overall strategy. A marathoner, in contrast, it basically has the mentality, it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. So you set the bar high enough to achieve your goals, but they're still attainable. And it's all about pacing yourself. So the pros of this approach is it gives you room to be proactive and shift your focus when something unexpected comes up. You can always go back to your strategy or goals to make sure your tactics are supporting that. And then it ensures that you're always working on more than one goal at a time to make progress on many goals. The cons of that is focusing on several goals at once means progress will be slow. So sometimes you just need to get those quick wins in addition to the pacing yourself. And also it's easy to get discouraged with a goal because it takes so long to accomplish. So we've all been there too, where you have these huge goals and it just seems so daunting or overwhelming. And so you might get hung up on that and get discouraged. So really the answer, what we want is a mix. So you don't have to be a sprinter or a marathoner. It takes all kinds to have an effective marketing strategy. And that's what we're going to go through in this presentation. What are some things that you can do to sprint, and what are some things that you can do to marathon to have a sound strategy for years ahead? So nearly half of companies don't have a strategy. So if you don't have a strategy right now, the whole point of this is to help you put that together, and you're certainly not alone. So almost 50% of organizations don't have a clearly defined marketing strategy. And this was based on a 2020 survey conducted by Smart Insights, and there were 332 respondents. So significantly, statistically significant. So why do you need a digital strategy, and why do you need it now? So I think we all know that customer expectations have changed. So customers are better informed. I mean, every time something pops in your head, you can just Google it and get the answer, and start digging into what kind of choices you want to make and who you want to hire. So in addition to quality of service and competitive pricing, there's just basically higher expectations, and customers have a lot of choice now. Emerging technology. So I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing your customers or potential customers probably reaching out to you via text. They're hard to get a hold of when you call them back. You're getting their voicemail. People just want a quick way to reach you, and that could be a live chat. That could be over text. And so that's another reason why having a strategy and understanding what you can actually support will help you reach customers. Adaptability. So something that may have worked before doesn't work anymore. So I'm sure, with COVID especially, some of the tactics that you may have employed before, like putting things on door handles or knocking on doors and saying hello, and it just, in the time of COVID where everybody was social distancing, if those things worked before, they didn't work anymore. So you need to be adaptable, and having a strategy to understand where you can be flexible helps. And then consistency. So strategy helps, a plan or strategy helps with that, where if you decide we're going to do this once a month, or we're going to reach out to these customers at this cadence, then being able to go back and saying, hey, this is what we signed up for, this is in our plan, is really going to help create that consistent experience. So what if I don't do anything? So I told you already how much I love animals, especially cats. I had to get a cat in here somewhere. So what if I don't do anything? You're directionless. Competitors will gain market share. You're not integrated. and you're not optimizing. So having a plan and being able to refer back to that plan will show you where maybe you're falling short, or maybe that original plan, it's never perfect. So you can optimize when you realize, where are you falling short and where are you succeeding. So in a nutshell, no strategy means no goals, no action plans, and no way to measure your effort. So in order to put together a strategy, we're going to use a framework, or I'm suggesting a framework called RACE, or R-A-C-E. So even though it's called RACE, it actually starts with the plan, and PRACE or P-RACE doesn't sound as catchy, so it's called RACE. But it starts with a plan. So obviously, planning, this whole framework was actually developed by Smart Insights. So they have a great website with a ton of free resources. And they came up with this framework just to summarize key online and multi-channel marketing activities that roll up to an overall digital marketing strategy. And the idea is that regardless of the type of company you are and who your audience is, this framework can work for you. Basically just covers everything. So obviously first start the plan, defining your goals and what your strategy is going to be. Reach, so how are you going to grow your audience? So that involves building awareness of your brand, what you offer, your services, and then anything online and offline that drives visits to your website. ACT, so ACT is really short for interact. So, how do customers, potential customers, interact with your brand? It includes how you're going to drive subscribers for your email program if you have that in place, and then how do you generate leads. And then converting is actually achieving those sales online or offline. So for restoration companies, a lot of that transaction is going to happen offline, but how do you get them to the point where by the time they call you, they've already made the decision that they're going to go with you? And that's really the power of digital marketing. So what are those interactions leading up to converting? And then engaging, how do you encourage repeat business? And this can be, repeat business from the same customers, depending on the nature of who they are. Obviously, there's a lot of times in the restoration industry where it's a one-off situation where it doesn't necessarily lend itself to repeat business, but there's also the word of mouth referral is really powerful as well. So that falls in this engage bucket. So let's go through each one, and we'll go through how to get started in each phase. So the plan starts with the plan. So we have a cool Ben Franklin here, got a little makeover. So by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. So I'm sure you've heard that in a lot of different presentations. But I think it's always a good reminder that it really starts with preparation to succeed. So as I mentioned before, it starts with planning. And what do we want to include? So there's a lot of terminology throughout this whole presentation that may be foreign to you, and don't worry. So don't get hung up on paid, owned, earned. These are all marketing terms. But I think when you see this graph like this, it'll kind of make a little bit more sense. And some of the terms are actually kind of intuitive. So under the reach category, that's really the top of the funnel that we saw earlier, where we're talking about paid media. So paid media is anything that you pay for to bring people to your website or to your business. So includes television, radio, print, events, and then Google, PPC. Those are types of paid media, basically anything that you pay for. Owned media is they're channels that you control. So your website is the most obvious type of owned media, but also your Facebook page or your Instagram page. or any other profile or in the context of digital marketing, any online property that you own and you control. And then there's earned media. So that's, in this case, it's customers are the channel. So that can be influencers in the industry who generate content for you and vouch for your business. And then it can also be customer testimonials would be an example of that too. When you delight a customer so much that they want to give you a quote and put it on your website, your marketing materials, that's an example of earned media. And then experience. So we'll get into detail with that too, but that's really what's that whole customer journey and how do they feel about interacting with your business, and making them so engaged or so excited that they become a repeat customer or refer you. So obviously, you know, besides planning, we want to be able to put that plan into action. So what I really like about this race framework, and that I think it's a little bit different than other planning frameworks, is that you first look at what you're doing now. So this isn't a throw away everything you've already done, all of the strides you've already made. It's about how can you look and reflect on what you have been doing and figure out what's working, what's not working, and fill in the gaps to have that more comprehensive plan that fits every bullet in the race in those phases. So the first part of this framework is auditing your current activities. Secondly, you would do a SWOT analysis. So if going back to maybe your college days or high school days, everyone talks about the SWOT analysis, but it is really helpful just to go through the exercise. So what do you do well? Where can you improve? What are some opportunities that maybe you're not capitalizing on? And what are some threats? Make it measurable. So this is really important to not only say, hey, I'm going to grow my traffic by, I'm going to double it in a year. It's how exactly are you going to do it? What are the tactics? And what are the milestones to get there? And so that's smart goals. And then finally, define your audience. So it's one thing to say, okay, my audience is homeowners, or my audience is property owners. But it's another thing to say, okay, well, I live in this geographic area. Most people live in these types of houses, or it's very apartment focused, or whatever the makeup is of the demographic and the location. That can really help you define who your audience is and provide the experience for that particular set or multiple sets of audiences. And that's the other thing too about talking about audiences again. That's the amazing thing about digital marketing is there's so much data that we have access to, or that we can have access to, that you don't get with traditional media or traditional marketing. So there's just a huge opportunity once you have that data to be able to segment your audience. So we're going to go through each phase, and we are going to look at KPIs. So how do you measure your success in each phase of race? What does that current capabilities audit look like? Just some questions to ask yourself. What are some things you can do to get ready for 2022? And then some quick tips for sprinting to success, and then more marathon type strategies that you can put together that are probably going to take longer than just Q4. So it starts again with planning. So these are kind of softer as far as KPIs. So it's basically like checking those off the list, that you review your current plan, set goals and objectives, and that you have a defined strategy. So this is where you want to work with your teams to audit your current marketing activity, develop SMART goals, segment your budget, have a marketing budget that you can reasonably hit, and then separate that into paid, owned, and earned media that we went over earlier. And then figure out how you're going to report on your progress, and then how often you're going to report, who you're going to review it with, just basically the process for that. So what are some things you can do to get ready for 2022? So you can set up your analytics. Even the biggest companies use Google Analytics. That's the one that I go to. It's free. It's very easy to use. So set up analytics or verify that you have it set up. Audit your digital marketing activity. Define your marketing budget. Conduct that SWOT analysis. And then check out free Google training. So all the Google products are free, and I don't have any tie to Google. So I'm not endorsing them. I just really like their products. So you can check out their free Google training. You can actually get certified. And it's pretty easy to understand and consume. So what's the quick thing that you can do to check your Google Analytics setup? So if you have Google Analytics now, or whatever Google Analytics tool you use, but this is specific to Google Analytics, you can go and log in, and they have a real-time report where you can see who's on your site right this minute, which is pretty cool. And I say who, you can't see all their details, but you can see how many people are on your site and what pages they're even looking at. And there's a couple other ways here too. You can view in your source code depending on what browser you're in, or you can use a Google Chrome extension where it actually lets you test tags. So you can tag, check if your Google tags are in there correctly. There's no duplicate. So the SWOT analysis, you can do it quick and dirty, or you can spend a lot of time on this. But just getting a sense of what your strengths and weaknesses are will really help you with putting your plan together. So this is an example of one for a restoration company. So, what do we do well, and where are opportunities? So I'll use superior operations and service to go after an increasingly sophisticated consumer market. We saw how consumers have changed. And you know what you're going to be strong at, or what you are strong at. So those are the things you want to capitalize on. Those are the lowest hanging fruit that you've done so long that you can just repeat and repeat. Threats. So we depend on our high quality and service, but it's hard to attract and keep good people. So we all know in this industry right now, and really across all industries, they're calling it the great resignation right now. There's people who are leaving their jobs in droves, and it's really hard to find and keep good people right now for all business owners. So that's a threat, and trying to mitigate that. Weaknesses. So industry consolidation is another major trend in the industry, but maybe you're weak in marketing. So we have no skills or knowledge. So that's something that you would want to improve on. And then our poor marketing and precarious financial condition are dangerous given the increased competition we face. So those are the types of things that you want to work to eliminate. And by going over to that first quadrant, by getting some training, or hopefully you get something out of this presentation as well, then you can work to improve or eliminate those. So the next in our RACE framework is reach. So this is where you're working to grow your audience, and how are you going to measure that? So the KPIs that you're looking at is audience volume. So those are things like impressions, users, visits, audience quality, and then audience value and cost. So when you're looking at your current capabilities, you're going to look at, hey, do I have a defined brand message? And this doesn't mean that you need to have some catchy slogan. It's more like, okay, what do I stand for, and how am I different than the competition? So it's kind of like your guiding light. So just having a defined brand message. Have you conducted keyword research? There are free tools like Google Search Console, but there's also other tools, and I have a resources slide at the end that we'll share that you can use for free or very affordably to conduct your own keyword research And then when I say keyword research, I'm talking about for search engines. So what keywords are people using to find your site? Do you have a marketing dashboard in place? So do you have some kind of tool to measure your progress? Is your content on your website optimized? And is your site fast? So there's all kinds of statistics that you can find online to show with just a slight improvement, like we're talking seconds, like 1 second can improve your conversion rate. And for you, that's going to be people reaching out and contacting you most likely. So having your site fast and mobile friendly is number one. So what can you do to get ready for 2022? You can set up Google Search Console, which basically just measures how people are getting to your site, what keyword phrases they're using. You can define your key brand messages. You can audit your Google My Business profile. So we're going to talk a lot about Google My Business because it's so important for contractor companies to have that dialed in. You could create segments and goals in Google Analytics that support your plan, and then set up a digital dashboard report. So we kind of went over the channels earlier that make sense for driving your audience under reach. Okay, so if you guys, hopefully you're not sleeping yet, we have another poll to stay engaged. So question for you, have you claimed your Google My Business listing? So again, scan the QR code and answer that. And we'll give it maybe 20 seconds or so. Okay, cool. This is awesome. So great job. You've claimed it. If you haven't even started, I'm going to show you how you can get started. And if you're working on it, that's great too. And hopefully some of these tips will get you over that hump if you're stuck. I have another quiz before we get into the details. So scan that. So the question is, you have 15 seconds to answer. How much do you think your Google My Business listing contributes to your ability to rank locally? Okay, so it looks like most people think 72%. So the answer is 33%. So it's probably good news because it's a little bit more balanced than maybe you thought it was going to be. But this just shows, and you've seen it, when you search restoration company near me, for example, that local pack are those first 3 results that show up. And your Google My Business profile represents 33%. So of your chances basically of getting in that local pack. So it's still the majority, but there's other things that contribute. So customer reviews, on-page SEO, like actually on your site, and if you've optimized for a local search. And then there's these other ones as well. One more quiz in this section. So what do you think is the biggest factor in ranking your Google My Business listing? All right, reviews, that's the main answer. So it might surprise you that business name is the biggest factor. So all of these other, including reviews, they're important. The business name is number 1. So Sue, looks like there's a tie. Sue, Jamie, Melissa, Erica, awesome. Okay, so sprint. What's a quick thing you can do to get ready for 2022? So you can audit your Google My Business listing if you started it. So there's 12 factors that I listed here, but the ones that really focus on are optimizing your listing name. So I think optimizing sounds a little scary or intimidating. It's really not. It's really all about consistency. So number 5 on this list is check NAP consistency. So that's your name, your address, and your phone number. So Google looks at your consistency across your website, your Google My Business listing, Facebook, anything that shows your contact information. It's ensuring that it's consistent, so you're not confusing customers or doing anything tricky. So optimizing your listing name, people don't have to guess who you are, and then it matches your website. Primary and secondary categories. So there's a ton of different categories that you can choose from, what type of company you are. And having website links are important to your main, your homepage. Having that also consistent. And then collecting and responding to reviews. So those are the big ones. And then I put this resource in here, which you'll get when you get the recording. But you can actually look up, there's a link here, or you can Google it, GMB audit template. So there's lots of different options. I like this one from Dalton Luca, but basically you just can go through and have a checklist to audit your own listing or listings if you have multiple locations. So what does an optimized listing look like? So, I don't know about you guys, but if I were looking for an electrician and Carl and Ernie showed up in my results, I'm gonna go with Ernie, because me personally, like, if you can catch me on Yelp, I'm a huge reviewer. I love to review. I love to read reviews. I make decisions based on reviews when it comes to purchasing or hiring somebody. So if you can look here, it's very easy to see that, Ernie is, he's got some great pictures on there. The website is available. Carl doesn't even have the website link, his website link on there, making it hard to contact him. The reviews and ratings, I'm impressed with Ernie. He has a ton of reviews. I feel like that's a little lofty, but it is clear that he has enough that you feel confident that people are reviewing his business and have had a good experience. And then, his hours, phone number, and then Q&A. So basically everything I need as a consumer looking for an electrician is here. And by the time I call Ernie, like, I'm 95% sure, like, I'm going to hire Ernie. Like, he really has to mess something up, or his, person answering the phone or whatever, they really have to do something that I don't like to make me not hire Ernie at this point. So this kind of shows you the contrast of how much of a difference this makes. So Google My Business tips and tricks. So, it doesn't start when you just claim, but when you do claim your business, it's really important that the owner claims the listing. You don't want somebody who, you don't know how long they're going to be in your company claiming it, and then they leave, and then you can't figure out how to log in, you can't change it. I know we've all been there, I'm sure, with Facebook or Google or any of this stuff where you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to get a hold of this person. I don't know how to log in and change anything. So having the owner claim the listing is important, especially in this business. Progress, don't make too many changes at once. If you just go in and you just start changing everything, Google's like, hey, what's going on? So, you can change it once as you're getting your profile set up, and then just don't keep changing it every day and tweaking it. Kind of give it some time. Add photos and publish posts weekly. So weekly is a recommendation for you. It might be monthly. It depends on your volume of business, but just keeping it fresh is important. Messaging, so you can turn on messaging to connect directly with consumers through Google. And then reviews. So I know, I'm sure everybody has questions about reviews or has had negative, hopefully positive experiences too with reviews, but it is important to show that you are monitoring and liking and responding to reviews, even the negative ones. So what happens if you get suspended? This happens from time to time. So you will have an info section, and it will list how it violates Google's guidelines. And it's pretty straightforward to follow what they need you to do. Usually it's like submitting, a bill or something that shows that it truly is your address, and you can get off that list. Okay, so we got another poll. So what tool are you using now to measure digital marketing performance? So if you were using something, so nothing is also a option. Awesome. This is great. I love this tool. I love this Slido poll so much. It's so cool to see this in real time. I'm such a nerd about this. So combo of many tools is what most people are saying, which is great. I'm glad that you guys have one tool, let alone many tools. The Google Analytics, Dash, nothing, and then HubSpot. And I'm sure there's some other ones that aren't even named here. So, a more long-term thing that you can do is to set up a digital marketing dashboard. So, Gear Solutions Dash, of course, I have to show this. So if you're not familiar with BI reporting, that's where this dashboard comes from. And, obviously, just like with any tool, you have to have the data to be able to manipulate it and make it visual how you want to. So this is just some sample data on how you could actually measure beyond just the impressions and visits and users and things that you're getting out of Google Analytics, but actually, like, what's the ROI? So, what are you investing into your marketing, and then what are you getting out of it? So you can customize this however you want, as far as what channels you focus on: social media, email, organic SEO, Google PPC. So there's just one thing available in BI reporting. You might have one in Google Analytics or Google Data Studio or HubSpot that you use, but this is another option too. Apps. So what are the KPIs to measure the second phase? So leads, dwell time, so how long do people stay on your site, and then shares, comments, and likes, basically engagement in social media. So how are you going to audit your current capabilities? So, do I have a content marketing strategy? Maybe for you, it's an editorial calendar. Are you measuring conversion rates? Are you using ad remarketing, retargeting capabilities? And is your content credible and trustworthy? So what can you do in 2022? So you can create an editorial calendar. Again, there's a ton of free resources online to use the template. And basically what this is going to do, this is so important for this phase, is help you determine what's your cadence for talking to your audience. So whether it's social media or email, what's doable with the resources you have and the budget you have, as far as how many emails can you realistically send out? How many times can you post on social media? And the thing that I like to say is that the most important thing is consistency. So if you decide you can only post on Facebook, if that's a channel that you use, once a week, stick to once a week until you're ready and have the resources to do twice a week. It kind of looks frantic when you get excited one week and you post every day, and then the next week you post one day, and then you go 3 weeks and don't say anything. You lose people's interest, and if they like the content that you're sharing, they're going to come back and follow you and get excited for when you post next. So it's better to be consistent than just posting all the time. So if you don't have an email platform, that's another thing that you can set up. There's a lot of free options for that as well, and it's pretty easy to add a form to your website. So there's some other things that you can put in place. So speaking of email, so one thing that you can do really quickly is to set up an email program for cheap or even for free. I mean, obviously you're gonna have to have somebody on your team or hire someone to pull that content together. But just getting that started is pretty easy out of the box. And just if you have to only pick 2 emails to send on a regular basis, I'd recommend an automated welcome email. So if somebody fills out a form, just basically letting them know, like, hey, we got your message. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Here's a little bit about us. And that could just go out every time someone fills out the form on your site. And then a monthly newsletter. So this just keeps your brand in front of people. And if it all comes down, for anything that you buy, if somebody helps you in some way, see something in a different way, or gives you a quick tip, you're going to remember that, and you're going to be more likely to reach out to them. So you could do things depending on the weather patterns in your area, give some helpful seasonal tips, or some money saving advice, for example, when it comes to restoration. So marathon options, this takes longer to put in place because there's more moving pieces. But thinking about developing a community outreach program. So, the statistic at the bottom of this slide, when consumers think a brand has a strong purpose, they are 4.5 times more likely to champion the company and recommend it to friends and family. I think that especially because of COVID, and we were really just stuck for the good and the bad with our people in our community. And I think more than ever, we just saw how important our community is to help each other out and to come together. And, consumers nowadays want to work with companies that share similar values. So partnering with a local community outreach program can be a great way to reinforce your brand message, whether it's just being helpful or just your dedication to service. It's just another way to reinforce that. And I told you that I was going to have some Flint references in here. So one that stood out to me was that during the height of the Flint water crisis, that 300 union plumbers installed water filters for Flint residents for free. So that made a huge difference in the community, and just really made people believe in the plumbers union and their dedication to servicing the community. So convert is the next phase. So how do we measure that? Those are the actual tangible sales on and offline, revenue and profit that you're generating, and average order value. So looking at your current capabilities, so do you have A/B testing in place? And A/B testing is another one of those things that are like, oh man, how am I going to do this? Seems pretty daunting, but it can be pretty simple, and I'll break it down. Are you supporting offline conversion? So is your sales team measuring offline sales as well? What system do they put that in? Do you have a way to track that? And then looking at, the next bullets are kind of, similar in that, are you investing enough in the channels that are working? And are you even tracking channel attribution and which channels are really driving leads for you or driving sales? So again, the whole conversion rate and the effect of speed and mobile friendliness of your site on that is super important. If you can do it, considering live chat or real-time support, and that goes for Facebook too. Facebook is just another example where you can handle a lot of requests through that platform for free, and then optimizing pages with A/B testing. So Sprint, what can you do now? So you can make sure your site is mobile friendly. This just breaks down the difference between mobile friendly and mobile first indexing, and what you should be interested in is mobile friendliness. So basically, is your site, maybe you've heard the word mobile responsive. So whether it's on someone viewing on a desktop or regardless of the browser or on their mobile phone, they can have the same experience. And it's, again, easy to test your site, just like the speed test. So you can use Google's mobile friendly test. You can use your browser, so you can drag it. There's also some tools built in Chrome, for example, where you can right click and choose to inspect a page to see if it's mobile friendly. Obviously, you can use just look on your phone, and your friend's phone, your husband's phone, your wife's phone. You can use Google Chrome, as I mentioned before. And then there's also a page speed insight tool that basically kills two birds with one stone as far as mobile friendliness and how fast is your site on the desktop and mobile. And then, you know, what can you do more long term? And this is the A/B testing that I mentioned before. So this is just a step-by-step process for A/B testing. And I think really what I want you to take away from this, and I think a lot of times it doesn't happen, is when you A/B test anything, you want to think about a hypothesis. Like, what do you think is going to happen if you change this thing? And as you practice and do more A/B testing to reinforce hopefully your hypotheses, you're going to just get better and better at predicting what works for your audience as you test these things. So what can you A/B test? So anything. I do think it's important to limit it to a few variables, because otherwise it's going to, if you try to test all of these things at one time, you're not going to know what really moves the needle. So I recommend testing one thing at a time. But if you have offers, you can test that. The overall design, buttons, copy, social proof. So maybe try one testimonial that's really short and sweet versus another one that's really detailed, or bringing in your reviews to show how many you're a 5-star business and actually showing people's comments versus not. Functionality of the page, what happens after they fill out a form, for example. Do they get a thank you email? Do they just see a thank you page? Do they get maybe a download right away? Do they get emailed to them? So you can test those types of things. And then targeting and trigger rules, like who sees certain things at what time. So I'm gonna have another quiz for you guys. So which page do you think performed better in the A/B test? I'll give you a few seconds to just check out these two pages and the differences between them. All right, so the first one was the control, and then the other one was the variation. Control, so everyone thinks the first one. But it's really the variation. Congratulations, Sue. So what were the results? So surprisingly, I was surprised too when I first saw this. The answer is the variation. So what they really were testing was colorful logos versus the black and white logos. And what their hypothesis was when they weren't seeing the results that they wanted were that the colored logos distracted the visitors away from the form. And they were really like clicking around, clicking the bright, shiny object. So they looked at the number of form submissions as a measure of success. The experiment ran for 22 days, and their hypothesis was correct. So, you know, why did that happen? So, as I mentioned, logos overshadowing the form, and it looked clickable. This is our last phase of the RACE framework. So, engage. So, how can we encourage repeat business, and how are we going to measure that? So, some things that you want to look at your current capabilities. So, are you tracking engagement? Is your support content, you know, how do they contact you if they're having issues? Is that effective? Do you have that in place? Onboarding process effective. So when you first land a new customer or client, like, do you outline the process, set expectations? So those are some things that you could do for 2022. And again, I always just don't want to scare people. So for example, outline your onboarding process. This can literally be a Word doc or a Google Doc or whatever you need to get your thoughts on paper. But if everybody is seeing the same thing, it just helps so much. So again, don't feel like you have to have all of these processes and documents and Excel spreadsheets. It's more like just getting your thoughts on paper and getting everybody on board. Literally on board for onboarding process. Establish a customer service process. So what's the escalation process look like? What's your SLA? When do you call people back? How should they reach you? Who should they go to? Set up a referral or review program. So we'll talk in a minute about getting more 5-star reviews and how to do that consistently. And then amplify your social strategy. So, you know the company you work with or work for and own, you may love it and you love the people you work with. And social media is such a great way to get that goodness about your brand and the people you work with out there. So just injecting that, your social strategy with that human element goes a long way. So what's a thing that you can do quickly or think about getting ready for 2022? So check on your quiet customers. So there are those people who always are going to reach out. You know what you're getting into with them. They always respond. They always have something to say. But you may be surprised that those quiet customers, no one's really asked them about their opinion, and they just are quiet because they're quiet people. But it never hurts just to kind of check in with them and make sure to thank them for their business and just see if they're happy with your interaction with them, if they have any suggestions. And the great thing is for these, silent customers, they're just going to have a conversation with you in most cases. They're not going to go out and maybe they didn't have a great experience. They're not going to be the ones that are loud on social media or putting a bad review up. They're going to give you some feedback that can be helpful to you without the public PR nightmare. So what is a marathon thing you can do to support this phase? So you can master getting more 5-star reviews. So some of the components of this, and this QR code that you see on this page goes to a recent blog that we put out, and so feel free to read that. But it just basically outlines what are all the things that you can do to master getting more 5-star reviews. So it's one of those things. It's not you ask, you get 1 or 2, and you kind of forget about it. It's the best way to get 5-star reviews is to really have a process where you ask every time who asked, and the technician asked, if someone called a follow-up to ask, like, what is the process to get reviews on an ongoing basis? And some things, just some ideas that are outlined in this blog post. You can offer inspired service. So there's, maybe there's something or someone in your company that has a great idea there, that it's that person who's great at planning parties, who always remembers your colleague's birthday and brings them flowers. That person probably has some great ideas to make your business really stand out by offering something that no one else does. And it could be something as simple as like, hey, on your way to the job, you ask the homeowner what their favorite Starbucks order is, or something like that. I mean, it's $5, and it's really going to go a long way to inspire them. And another one is just, getting socially active. So talking about reviews and sharing reviews online. Keeping track of every conversation. So of course, if any of you use Dash, you'll know that you can track all of your job notes from mobile and the desktop version of Dash. They sync to each other. So the good and the bad and the ugly interactions, you can keep track of those in Dash so that everybody is on the same page and seeing what conversations have already happened, which also really helps, as a person, as a consumer yourself, if you have service in your home or your property, and you're having to repeat yourself to every single technician or every single person that you interact with, it can be really frustrating. So by keeping track of those notes, then you avoid that cycle, and you also look awesome because the consumer told one person one thing, and then that other person has already got it. They've echoed it, and they come prepared. Number 4 seems like maybe like a gimme, but asking I'm sure a lot of you, a lot of business owners just don't ask for the review, and that kind of just goes a long way. Like in a conversation, you can insert it very naturally, like, "Oh, I'm so glad that you had a great experience with us. Would you mind giving a review? You know, if you're on Google or Yelp, it would really help a lot." And most times, people are more than happy to help. And there's a reinforcement of that in the statistics below. So 68% of customers will leave a review if asked. And then send reminders, we don't overdo it. So I'm sure you guys that's pretty straightforward. Nobody wants to be reminded over and over. Like, ask once, maybe twice max, but then let it go if they're not going to do it. And then another thing about getting reviews, so responding to all comments, even the negative ones. So this is kind of just a template of how you can make that process easy, and maybe you even come up with a real template on like what you typically say to negative reviews. But really, you know, I bolded number 6. You want to take the issue offline if at all possible. But this example on the right is basically this Joe gave a pretty bad review of a car dealership, and the car dealership, because they're responsive, we were able to turn it around from a 1-star to a 4-star. So, you know, just by replying and following up, that's huge, because there might be that one person who sees that negative review and they just move on to the competition. So it's worth it to put the effort in to respond to the comment. If you haven't heard about Pro Assist, that is NextGear's newest product, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a place where you can add your notes and have it automatically sync to Dash. But the really cool thing about this is that before you even go to the homeowner's home or the property owner's home, you can actually ask them to document the damage and ask questions, and they can send that to you. And by the time your technicians get there, they're probably going to have a pretty good sense of at least the extent of the damage, and if they need to send more people because it's a bigger job, or they need to bring particular equipment to take measurements. It just really saves time for your team, and also for the homeowner, which they will appreciate. So if you haven't heard about Pro Assist, definitely encourage you to check that out. And, you know, going back to the whole review process, you can actually collect feedback from the customer through that tool, and then that will give you a good sense of if you need to kind of mitigate something before they go online and submit a review. So just a recap, so in your Mad Dash to 2022, basically the steps are going to be setting goals. That's number 1. So what do you want to achieve? Doing an audit, so auditing your current marketing, coming up with a plan. How are you going to achieve your goals for 2022? And then following the RACE framework. So looking at what you're doing now and figuring out, you know, what you should keep doing and what you might want to revisit, or how you want to add to it. And then finally, there are a ton of resources that I either here at NextGear that we use and feel like they really help with our marketing, or ones that I've just used in the past that I definitely think are worth taking a look at. So again, you're going to get the steps. So you don't have to write these all down, but I hope they're helpful to you. And that's it.
Awesome. Jen, I think that there are a few questions in the chat that people submitted. And if you guys have any other questions for Jen, go ahead and put those in there. Where first from Valerie Wren, where do you find the free Google training?
Yeah, so I can send a link out, or we can send a link out after this for everyone who attended this. In fact, if you just take that note, I can send the exact link, but even if you Google, like depending on what Google product you're interested in, like if it's Google Analytics, you can look up Google Analytics certification. If it's Google AdWords certification. So Google has a whole like university with free resources, but I'll send that link after this.
Perfect. I looked it up just to see, and I think it's growonair.withgoogle.com. That looks like a whole lot of free digital resources, but we will wait and let Jen confirm that and then send that to the attendees following the webinar. All right. And then Natalie, I missed where the dashboard was from. Can you share that again? I think that was right after the BI.
That was the BI dashboard. Is that the question? So what was the dashboard that I showed?
Mm-hmm.
I can actually go back to it. There we go. So yes, this is an extension in Dash called BI reporting, and so business intelligence reporting. And if you've attended any of the other Pulse webinars, this was really a main focus in each of them on how to use BI reporting, how to use the data that you have in Dash to set up custom dashboard. So this was a dashboard. This one that we're looking at right now is a dashboard that was customized for this track. So like I mentioned, it's made up data, made up channels that we put in here. But with BI reporting, there's custom dashboards for your business that our product team can set up just for you and your business. And then if we see that through these presentations or just your feedback to sales, if there's a lot of demand for something like this, like a lot of people are saying, hey, I wish that BI reporting would do this or that, then it's something that we make available as a template for everybody. So anybody who wants to use, if there's a lot of demand for this particular dashboard or the finance and accounting dashboard, then it's one that we can just push out to everybody. And as long as you have the data, you can use it.
And also to mention on BI, if the BI reporting tool is something that you think you might be interested in and you don't currently have it, if you could email me or email our team at events@nextgearsolutions.com and we'll connect you with who you need to talk to about the BI reporting tool. All right, and then another question, what was the FLA acronym? What does that stand for?
FLA. I don't know. I don't know.
I know. I was trying to figure
Florida?
it out. I don't know at what part where that was. I was thinking fair labor.
It might be my Michigan accent and that
we'll go back through and figure that out too and give everybody the answer to that as well. Okay, so one more question in addition to some compliments. Thank you guys for that, for Jen doing a great job and giving us some very valuable information. Actually, two more questions. How do you recommend tracking leads brought in through digital marketing efforts, Dash marketing campaigns, question mark?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. Go back to this dashboard. So yes, one option is going to be Dash BI reporting, where you can basically the custom areas of this dashboard that would tie into that are your channels. So if you want to attribute sales and leads to the digital marketing channels that you focus on, then you would set up these channels, or we would help you set up these channels. You know, in this case, social media, email, organic SEO, et cetera. And then what's important is that you have the data in Dash to populate this. So obviously, you know, it doesn't come from nowhere. It would have to, you'd have to have your contacts tagged in a way that it would roll into these channels. They'd have, the contacts would have to be attributed to these channels, essentially. So there might be some processes, whoever is kind of the owner or whoever's updating Dash, that you kind of, and we would help you with this, work that out to try to figure out how to populate this dashboard using Dash and using BI reporting. But as far as recommendations, like you're already in Dash every day, you're already updating it. My recommendation would be to use Dash if you have the data in here, or it's relatively easy to make that happen. I know there are people on this call who aren't necessarily restoration contractors. Maybe they're small business owners, or maybe there's somebody else in the industry who supports the restoration companies, the restoration industry. So for you, Dash probably doesn't make sense to track your digital marketing lead generation. And in that case, I would recommend using Google Analytics. I mean, just looking at the poll, most people seem to have Google Analytics. And it's free, and there are things that you would need to do. Again, all of this stuff to get the right data in your system requires some process changes or tagging. So I don't know if you maybe use UTM tagging. Maybe it's another acronym where you're like, what are you talking about? But basically, UTM tagging is what you use to tag a add tracking to the end of a link, to the end of a URL, so that you can track specific campaigns in Google Analytics. So if you say, you know what, I'm going to run an ad in CNR magazine, and I want them to go to this landing page, then you can add tracking very easily for free. This is another tool that I'm happy to share with you guys. It's actually a campaign builder that you can say, you know, what is the source? So where are people coming from? They're coming from CNR magazine. And what is the campaign? Well, it's the, you know, Get Hurricane Ready campaign, or whatever you're going to call it. And then you can actually add that tracking to the end of your link, so that every person who visits that page, you can attribute to that print ad. Or if you run Google PPC, you can attribute all the leads that come in to that particular PPC ad, for example. So those are my two recommended. And it just depends on what technology you're using now.
Awesome. So there's just one last question. I think you may have just answered it, but I'll read it out in case there's anything else you want to add. How would you discern from a Google PPC ad and an organic Google web click?
Yeah, so even without any tracking in Google Analytics, if that's what you're using, it automatically segments that for you. So if you go into Google Analytics, you'll see what's the source, and there'll be organic search. So those are people who are just looking up restoration contracts near me and come to your site. They're not, and that was just one keyword phrase. There's many different permutations of that, but just Googling that, they don't click on any ads. They click on the first listing that goes to your website. And so those are all people coming from organic search. Google PPC, that is going to be tagged in Google Analytics as paid search, so, or paid media. So from there, you can, there's ways to segment it in Google Analytics to say, like, what's the source? It came from Google versus Bing. And then is it paid or is it organic? So you can see that now, again, without any type of tagging. The tagging would come in when you need to actually see, okay, I did an A/B test to see if this banner worked better than this banner. And then, okay, so now I see that this colorful one works better than this gray one, for example. And so I'm gonna put more money towards this colorful one, for example. But right now, organic versus paid, you can see that in Google Analytics if you have that set
up. Okay, it looks like that is all the questions. Does anybody have, we'll give about 1 more minute just in case anybody else has anything to throw out there for Jenn to answer. Hope everybody's found this very valuable. I know I have for sure. All right.
Oh, I know. You said there's no more questions. Anyone might show up, but just if you did, or if you didn't enjoy this, Beth is going to send out a survey, or I think it might even show up at the end of this presentation. She can clarify, but if you can fill out that survey, we would really appreciate it. Just because, again, this is the first time we've had a digital marketing track, and if it's something that you're interested in, I really enjoy putting this content together and meeting all you guys. So I would love to keep doing this if you find it valuable. So just let us know, or if there's something that you'd like to see different as far as content or format or anything, please let us know that too.
Okay, we do have a few more questions now. Someone's asking about getting a copy of the presentation. We can email this PowerPoint out to all the attendees, and we'll give some of the answers that we talked about earlier, where to find the free Google training. We'll just compose a whole email to send out to you guys. And then lastly, are there any tips for referral tracking on web-based leads?
That is a tough one. Typically, I mean, that's a tough one. The first thing that comes to mind is Dash BI reporting for that one. I mean, if you have a system or process in place for tracking referrals. So you said web-based leads. So if you have a system or process to track word of mouth referrals, for example, typically you would either have to have something where you have the sales rep or whoever is updating that for Dash, putting that information into Dash as a separate channel. So that's tracking basically offline leads. But if we're talking about web-based leads, it would, there's a source in Google Analytics, for example, that is literally called referrals. So you can drill into that report to track how many come from, maybe you wrote a piece for like R&R, or maybe you wrote an article for a friend's blog, or whatever it is. If you want to track those links, then again, that's where that UTM tagging would come in. So you would be able to see from that website if that website is referring leads. But if you add that tracking component, you would have more specific on what link did they actually click. Did it come from the blog that you wrote? Did it come from the banner ad that you put on their site? Whatever the case is, you could track either those two ways. One, either by process, with offline lead, or two, with tagging and tracking if it's an online lead.
All right. I think that is it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to always email events@nextgearsolutions.com. The survey will pop up in your web browser that Jenn mentioned, so please give us a few minutes of your feedback. We would really appreciate that. And you can expect an email shortly from us with all this great information. Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great day.